you're doing everything consciously, being aware. Even as I'm speaking to you now, I'm aware that I'm speaking to you and conscious of my hand gestures, and that is everything happening within and also without. And that, to me, that 360-degree awareness is what I'm calling mindfulness, and being mindful of everything that you're doing. Everything that I was doing was mind conceived, and there was a lot of mind chatter happening and draining your energy. Shall I do this? Shall I not do this? There's a conflict within you because of all that, and that conflict drains you, and there's a lot of anxiety and stress associated with it. Whereas with this one, those mind chatter is no longer there. Whatever you've ticked in your list of things to do, you still feel incomplete. There's something more that I need to do. Whereas over here, in this position of realization, you feel totally content, joyful, and fulfilling. Rather than the thoughts, the mind controlling you, you have a control over those thoughts in this situation. This is the difference. And therefore, there's so much time in your life, there's so much of energy in your life to do the things that you want to do. It is possible for everyone. It is not only for me. If it can happen to me, it is possible for everyone for that matter. Being aware of the mind, our own mind, and we are not aware of it. And most often we are caught and controlled by the mind, and we think that we are the mind. And if you are able to become even slightly aware of the behaviors of the mind, the functioning of the mind, our own mind, then you begin to have a control over your own life. And I think being aware of your own mind is what I realize as being mindful. And which means that, you're doing everything consciously, being aware. Even as I'm speaking to you now, I'm aware that I'm speaking to you and conscious of my hand gestures, and that is everything happening within and also without. And that, to me, that 360-degree awareness is what I'm calling mindfulness, and being mindful of everything that you're doing. As children, we were mindful, we were conscious, we were aware, and that is why this energy was radiating, you were connected. And but then during the upbringing, we have lost this awareness. Mindfulness, awareness, consciousness, they seem to point to the same thing. So we've lost it. Now we need a technique to bring us back. No matter, let us use those techniques. But then what happens is that the technique is required only until a certain time, when this awareness becomes second nature, like a child we were born. Until then we need a technique. It seems to like we need a technique. There are several techniques that people use to bring yourself back into the awareness mode. And I've actually mentioned that in my new book, The Art of Conscious Balance, several techniques that I have been using it. And these are my own, and some of these may work for you and you can relate to it, or you can improvise it. But what is important is to understand what awareness is. The awareness of your mind. The word awareness is a totally different meaning. For example, I'm aware of mathematics, I'm aware of chemistry, and I can talk about mathematics and chemistry to another person. This awareness I'm talking about is totally different, is a 360-degree awareness, the within and without. Light the room, the rats disappear and go into their corners, and the whole room becomes silent. The rat running around is like the mind chatter that is happening in your head. The torch light is the awareness. And the moment you take away the torchlight, the rats becomes active again. And likewise, once the awareness is gone, the mind becomes active again. So how do you bring this awareness constantly? This was there in the child, but during upbringing we lost it. Now we need to bring this torchlight, bring this awareness constantly. We need to remind ourselves to bring this awareness constantly, and for which we need some techniques. Imagine you're walking the dog. Now the dog is on a leash, but you just let loose the leash, the dog is going to run here. You pull it back, the dog comes back, and the dog runs over here, and you're pulling it back here, and the dog keeps running, and you keep pulling the dog back to you. Otherwise, the dog is going to bark and bite somebody. So the dog is the mind, and the leash is the awareness, the techniques that you're using. So you're using any technique to bring the awareness, to bring the mind back into your control. You are actually pulling it back, and until such time the dog stays here with you. And then you remove the leash, the dog will still be with you. So you don't need the leash anymore. You don't need the techniques anymore. And likewise, the dog is the mind and the leash is the technique. And so until such time it becomes second nature, that awareness comes into you, you need the techniques. Imagine this to be that Santosh who is a baby, full of joy, full of energy, and full of awareness and connectedness. And the baby is, always smiling. And if you actually call this baby an idiot, this is going to smile at you because, doesn't bother, he's not going to react. Now, as we grow up during our upbringing, this is what I'm talking about. This is the mind. The mind conceived you, or Santosh is here, and label it here as Santosh. And Santosh has got its likes, dislikes, and the baggage, the whole baggage, like the anger, the anxiety, and stress, and all those things that we download, which I meant the baggage which you have actually acquired from your parents, teachers, society, and books, which is what I call the corrupt software. And the corrupt software is being downloaded on to a beautiful hardware. Now, if you want to call it, this is your true self, and this is a facade, or this is false self. For want of better word, I'm using those terms. A true self and a false self, so that you can relate and I can relate. And so what happens is that this true self is covered by this mind-conceived facade, which is the false self, preventing this true self from expressing. And now there is a lot of conflict happening. What do I mean by conflict? Now, this person says, look, I need to do this. And this person says, no, don't do it. And therefore this is the mind chatter that is happening in you. The rats, I meant in my analogy. There's a lot of things happening in. I probably want to be successful in an exam or an interview. And this person says, yes, I will be successful. And this person says, no, there could be a lot of other things that can go wrong. So be careful. And therefore, there is a lot of conflict, and that conflict drains your energy, and also not only drains your energy, but also prevents you from fully functioning in your life. You take one step forward and two steps backward, and you are caught in a prison of your own, a mind-conceived prison. And so this is all happening because of the lack of awareness as you grow up. This is happening unbeknownst to you. And now we're constantly on a treadmill. And life is a struggle. You're hitting your head against the wall. And you're just getting by. And there's no control. We don't know where we're going. We seem to be going somewhere, but we don't know where. And looking, searching all over. But I guess what we're searching for is all external. And when you go dive deep within, you will realize that this true self is what you were looking for. And that is there with you always, but prevented by this mind-conceived facade, false self, from expressing. And this is like, you're actually looking for your own reading glasses for everywhere, not knowing that it was actually on your nose all the time. And that's the analogy. And therefore, what is required is that this is struggle, but the challenge is that this is required, for our survival, and just survival. But if you want to thrive and flourish, this has to go. And this is what I'm talking about: intelligence, connecting to the intelligence. This is the intellect, and then this is the intelligence. Intellect is required for our survival, whereas intelligence is required for our fully flourishing and functioning with full creativity. So how do we do this? This comes with awareness. And what do I mean by awareness? Is the torchlight. So shining the torchlight and becoming mindful. And so the moment you become mindful, this goes away. And if I need it, I can bring it back. But why are we not able to do it? Because we've been habituated. And now it's a question of kicking the habit. And how do you kick the habit? And by reminding yourself constantly to become aware. And that needs a technique. And that is the technique that I've actually mentioned in my new book, The Art of Conscious Balance. And that technique is only required to a certain extent. And then a time comes when awareness becomes second nature. And you have a full control over when to use the intellect, when to keep it away, and connect it. And this is the art of conscious balance. For my own understanding, for my own realization, and then subsequently I realized that if this were to be true for me, it must be true for other people as well. And they must also be struggling, and they must also be going through the same situation as I'm going through. And therefore, I wrote my journey in a way that people can relate, and some of the techniques that I've used, I've actually explained it, and came several books, but the latest book is The Art of Conscious Balance, in which I've actually explained how I bumped into this awareness, how I bumped into this realization of this true self being prevented by this facade or this conditioned false self from expressing. And I guess this is the question everybody's asking: who am I? Who am I? Am I this true self, or am I this, the facade? My likes, my dislikes. I'm an engineer, I'm a doctor, I'm actually a nurse. Who am I really? And once you ask the question, for which you need to get out of the treadmill, and then ask these questions, then you elevate your life. And then everything seems possible. Things that you thought is beyond me begins to happen and manifest totally beyond your understanding. To people who are willing to listen, people who are ready. There's a lot of people who are actually not ready yet, because they are caught in that lack of awareness, and therefore they're going to continue to be on that treadmill. But a time comes in life, I guess that's probably what is called the midlife crisis or whatever, you begin to ask certain questions. That is when people have no idea. They look for books, they look for gurus. They are the ones who are probably needing some attention or some kind of hand holding. And to those people, my experience and my techniques might be of some use to them so that they can start their self-introspection. And the other thing that I would always, and I wanted to share with other people, is that, I found this, I bumped into this in a very hard way, in a traumatic way. Don't wait for that to happen. You can actually start soon. That is, getting out of the treadmill and doing that self-introspection, asking those questions, as basically asking those questions, who am I? And if you were to pass or share this with a young child before they actually get into that treadmill, wouldn't it be nice that, it has taken several years for me to realize this? Would the child realize this sooner so that his or her life becomes much better than mine at a young age? That this person has a lot of clarity on what he or she is wanting to do in life. Even if that doesn't happen, if we were to put a seed in there, it may not germinate now, but when they get into that treadmill of life, when they struggle and not knowing what to do in life, and sometimes these young adolescent children looking for drugs, looking for drinks, looking for smokes, and ultimately some suicide. At that time, if this seed can germinate and ask that question, who am I really? What am I doing here? And why am I struggling? Those questions, then probably this person can come back with resilience and elevate his or her life from whatever, where they are stuck, into something bigger and fulfilling and joyful. Previously, I was chasing things on the external, like, getting a position, getting a car, getting a house, having this much of bank account. Those are all the external things. Whereas now, when I've actually dived in and started doing the self-introspection, when it is inside out, the intrinsic joy still remains, and irrespective of whether you have all this position or not, you feel totally content. So I guess the inside out approach is what gives me that intrinsic joy. And if things were to happen, it will happen on the outside. When the mind comes in, it is actually telling you, look, you haven't done this. You can't be sitting idle like this. You got to work on this. There is other thing. You need to pay your EMI. You need to pay your mortgage. You need to look after your children. And there's a whole lot of other, thoughts that's actually coming in and draining your energy. Those are things that you need to do. But if you do it consciously, you will notice that there are some things that you can actually do it now, which you need to do, and you're comfortable. And the rest of the things, they are thoughts that are actually vying for your attention, and that doesn't require the attention in this moment. So you can just ignore it. And that awareness comes in. And when that awareness comes in, there's a lot of energy that you're saving. And there's so much time as well. You're not running behind each thought, telling you what to do and what not to do. Rather than the thoughts, the mind controlling you, you have a control over those thoughts in this situation. This is the difference. And therefore, there's so much time in your life, there's so much of energy in your life to do the things that you want to do, not what the other people expect you to do. And therefore, everything that you're doing is creative and comes with a divine energy. I am in the corporate life. I still have a biotechnology company that I've founded. I'm running, and the same principle applies here now as well. And if you can ask me, some of the things that I'm doing currently after this realization is totally beyond me. There's no way I could do what I'm doing currently. And I wonder how is this possible? I always wonder how is this possible? And I can fully know that I can't do it myself. Therefore, that's the kind of thing that happens. And that is why I call it comes from the intelligence, and you can call it the nature or divinity or whatever it is. The words are all it can be interpreted differently, but there is something out there, a power which comes through you and something happens. Writing a book, running a company, and doing this interview and talking to people, holding conferences, I couldn't have even thought of doing it. But how is it possible for a reclusive person like me? Is beyond me, and therefore I have to just accept it and say that there is some higher energy and a divine power happening. And it is possible for everyone. It is not only for me. If it can happen to me, it is possible for everyone for that matter. We have a choice. And are you willing to step out of this treadmill? And once you're willing to step out of the treadmill and ask certain questions about why am I driving this car with all these flat tires, which is not taking me anywhere, and why don't I take the time to fix those tires, then begins your self-introspection. That is the day when self-introspection begins, and that is what people probably call diving deep within. Now, whatever I'm doing, I do it out of my joy. Therefore, when I do it out of my joy, it is not like a job. It is a beautiful being, and I enjoy it. And there's a lot of energy, because previously everything that I was doing was mind conceived, and there was a lot of mind chatter happening and draining your energy. Shall I do this? Shall I not do this? There's a conflict within you because of all that, and that conflict drains you, and there's a lot of anxiety and stress associated with it. Whereas with this one, those mind chatter is no longer there, and you're in a space of complete conscious awareness. There is a different way of living, and that is when I started questioning everything that I was doing, questioning my conditioning, and questioning the intellect that I was plugging into for survival. And therefore, I was able to elevate my life from that survival mode to that of flourishing, thriving, and fully flowering. And my first book came out in 2000, and that was called A New Way of Living. And I fully realize that a new way of living is possible, is a choice for everyone.
MINDIA, Mind of India.